All right, we're going to talk about layout now. Layout is kind of a step that needs to happen before we do any other milling, once we've got our block down to size. The reason we're going to do layout is because we want to go ahead and have the ability to double check our setups on the mill. And when we lay out here, we're going to mark the center points of the 4 holes, and we're going to frame in this pocket. To do that, right, we're going to use what's called layout die, which is this stuff here in the blue box or blue bottle. This stuff does not come off. So if you get it on your clothes, you get it on your hands, it's there on your clothes forever, and it's on your hands and face or whatever else for a very, very long time. But what we're going to do with the layout die is we're very carefully going to paint layout fluid on one face of our workpiece. When we paint that on there, what we're going to be able to do is scratch marks that will correspond with the intersection of specific lines or the location of hole centers and pocket outlines. What we're going to do now, once you've got this painted on here and we've allowed it to dry, we need to mark our reference corner. Right? On the plans, all of our points or holes are measured from one edge, okay, and up from another edge. So this corner, this bottom left-hand corner, is our reference corner because all of our layout is going to come from the left edge, okay, or from the bottom edge up. So on the workpiece, what I'm going to do, after this is dried, I'm going to just put a little X marks the spot so that I remember that this edge and this edge are the edges that I'm going to measure from when finishing up my layout. To actually put our layout lines on our workpiece, we've got a couple of specialized pieces of equipment. The first is this gigantic hunk of granite. This is called a surface plate. This has been ground and polished to an incredibly flat tolerance so that anything that we lay on this, okay, is going to register nice and flat, and our dimensioning coming off of the surface plate will be very accurate. The other is what's called a height gauge, which is this thing right here. Now the height gauge is kind of like a caliper in that it will tell us the distance from the surface plate to the scribe on the end of the height gauge arm. In order for this to work accurately, we first have to zero the height gauge to the surface plate. So I'm going to lower the height gauge scribe until it just touches the surface plate. Once it's touched the surface plate, I can move this dial until 0 lines up with my needle, and I can zero these 2 dials here. So now what's going to happen is anytime I move this up or down, it is going to keep track an accurate account okay, to 1,000th of an inch of how far above the surface plate I am on the scribe. Now we're going to use the surface plate and the reference edges on our workpiece to go ahead and transcribe 6 lines onto our part. Okay? 4 of the lines are going to locate the centers of the holes, and then the additional 2 lines are going to outline the slot. So my first step is to look at my plans, and I'm going to lay out a horizontal line that runs along the bottom of my workpiece. Okay? This horizontal line is going to represent the center of the 2 lower circles or holes. So I put my reference edge down on the surface plate. I'm going to go ahead and set my height gauge to the dimension that is called out on the plans, which is 500 thousandths. I'm going to lock the surface plate, okay, just a little bit of pressure there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the surface or the height gauge and scribe a line through the layout die onto my workpiece. Okay, so that line is 500 thousandths above the surface plate, right? And that surface plate has got the reference edge of my workpiece laying flat on it. So that line is exactly where we need it. Now I'm looking at my plans again, And the holes that are on the left-hand side of the part are 500 thousandths of an inch from one of my other reference surfaces. So rather than reset the surface or the height gauge, I'm just going to turn my workpiece over to the other reference surface, and without changing my settings here, I'm going to scribe another line. So now the intersection of those two lines is the exact center of my bottom left hole. Once those are marked, I'm going to go ahead and adjust my height gauge to my next number, okay, and I'm going to scribe the center of the top two holes. And the center of those is 1.562 inches above the height gauge. So there's 1.5612. Again, we'll lock, okay, and we're going to gently scribe a line on our workpiece. That happens to be the only part, okay, that is, or the only line that we need at that 1.562 dimension. So now I'm going to move and I'm going to do the centers of the rightmost holes. Now remember, I have to go from a reference edge. So according to my plans, the right-hand holes are 500 plus 2.9 inches from that reference edge. So that's 3.4 inches up. So I'm going to set my height gauge to 3.4, lock it, right, and scribe those two lines, or that line there. So right now what I'm looking at are 4 lines. The intersection of those 4 lines is, or are, the center of my 4 holes. Now the last thing I need to do is double check and mark my pocket. Okay, now the pocket says it's, the left edge of the pocket is 1.125 inches above the surface plate, or from the left edge of my part. So I'm going to set the height gauge to 1.125, put my reference edge down, and put a little scribe mark there. Now I'm going to have to do a little bit of math here. 1.125, okay, plus the width of the pocket, which is 1.65, is 2.775. So we go up 2.7, and then we go another 75, lock it. We're just going to scribe there. So now what you're looking at here are the 6 layout lines that we need. The intersection of these 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, are the centers of the 4 holes. And then the outline of this is the central pocket on the part. Now these layout lines for us are going to serve just as a quick reminder or check to make sure we're in the right place when we set the mill up. Okay, we're not going to use them to kind of guide any dimensions or any locations. We're going to use them to double check our parts.